Hey girl, what's up?
Hey.
Let's talk about it. Can we please talk about it? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Can we please talk about it? Let's talk about it.
Well, hello, and welcome to today's edition of Can We Please Have a Talk? I'm Elaine Pat Britton, and I'll be coming to you weekly with things that pertain to our everyday living. In part 3 of America, What's Really Going On, I will be presenting my findings as to what I believe is going on with the state of our children and their behavior. Last week, I introduced you to a gentleman who survived his mother's attempts to take his life. It appears that she may have been suffering from what doctors call postpartum psychosis. I began exploring this illness for one purpose, but landed on whether or not this disorder may have some correlation as to why some children behave so destructively. There is a strong belief that children can feel what their mothers feel while in the womb, so I couldn't help but to wonder if their behavior is stemming from what their mothers are experiencing before and after their birth. If it is true that babies can sense what a mother is feeling while they are in the womb, and I believe there is some truth to this, could this then be what's leading them down a path of violence? Upon my conversation with a gentleman whose mother tried to take his life on multiple occasions, I began to consider that if a mother's role is to nurture and foster good behavior, could the absence of this role be why so many children are becoming so destructive? We know that most of what children learn mainly starts with their mother. And if one of the roles of a mother is to nurture and to foster good behavior, what's going on in the lives of these children who can so easily pick up a gun and take the life of a human being with no remorse or regards for human life? Could it be that we aren't teaching them to do unto others as you would have them do unto you, or to love thy neighbors as you would love yourselves? And then also, could it be that they aren't being taught to love because we ourselves don't know what love is or how to love? I'll get into more when I share my one-on-one with Pastor Odell Sterling of Chicago. But for now, let's explore. If a mother's job is to guide and nurture, but she's absent, who's there to do the work? Too many, I find, are being left in the hands of those who do not necessarily have an invested interest in their lives. I'll share why I say this in just a moment. But for now, in looking into my own personal life, I know that it's one thing to have your father abandon you. It's a whole nother can of worms when mama isn't there. And so children are, in a lot of these cases, not receiving what's needed to help them become loving or considerate adults. Even more troubling is that while many mothers are physically in the home, some of them have mentally checked out. So once again, children are without the necessary supervision. To discuss this matter at hand, I had a one-on-one with a woman who is constantly in the field working to help children cope with the absence of their parents and emotional abandonment. We will meet her when we return from break. Gunshots ringing out. The sound of motors revving. Tires screeching as it flees the scene. These are the sounds riddling many of our neighborhoods. Why is this? What would cause a child to pick up a gun and without hesitation use deadly force with no remorse or regards for human life? I'm Elaine Pat Britton, author and producer of the stage play Mama's Place. After raising children of my own and spending years in the classroom and counseling many students, I believe I have now unearthed what's behind all these acts of violence across our cities and all across this nation. I share this and more in my latest book entitled America, What's Really Going On? This compilation includes my personal journey and struggles as a mother, along with testimonies from those who experienced some of the very same issues. For more information or to get your copy, go to www.divinitybookpress.com. If you know of anyone, especially a young struggling mother or a family member or friend or coworker or even a neighbor who can benefit from some words of encouragement and inspiration as they maneuver this fight to raise children, I implore you to share this information. In the meantime, please know that I'm doing all I can to not only educate our children, but to also persuade them to turn from the violence and to live a more positive, purpose-filled life. I'm Elaine Pat Britton. Peace and blessings to you and yours. As I shared with you before the break, many of our children are becoming more and more violent. Here to help us to get a better understanding as to why this may be occurring is Miss Janell Cox-Bey. I want to first of all thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me, Miss Britton.
So look, you're in the field constantly dealing with some of these children who are suffering from emotional abandonment issues. And we're here to gain some type of insight, some sort of insight as to what it's like for you, as well as some of those children who are suffering from emotional abandonment. And so you and I talked about this during a time when I co-authored a book called Secondhand Survivor. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and what it's like for you in the field and how long you've been working in the field.
I've been in this field now for 28 years.
Okay.
Right out of undergrad, I started in child welfare, and from child welfare, I went into the school system. I started off with working I ran a teen parent program. I directed a teen parent program for 5 years. And then after that, I went on to become a high school social worker.
Tell me some of the stories that you've encountered working with children who suffer from these type of issues.
Okay, so there is lots of stories.
I'm sure.
For the most part, I would say a good percentage of my students, we are in a poverty area. So it's low income. I would say 75 to 80% of my population is low income.
Okay.
So I have seen my share of family dynamics, whether it's dealing with financial issues, abuse, physical, emotional, you name it. It's a plethora of issues I've addressed. This year, particularly because I'm dealing with the pandemic, we're dealing with COVID, I've seen a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety. And we've had a lot of loss. So okay. It's nothing to see a student today and tomorrow they'll come and say, I lost my mother to COVID. Wow. That's happened quite a bit this year. Overwhelming amount, to the point that I've had to develop a lot of grief groups for this population.
Okay. So, here's where I'm going with this story, because I started out trying to research a little bit about postpartum depression to see if there was some correlation to why some of these children behave as they do. But what I'm finding out is that, and particularly the more I hear stories on the news about mothers, single mothers in particularly, who have invited young men into their homes, and as a result of them, some of them are actually losing their babies, physically losing their babies to death, unfortunately. And so what I'm finding, and maybe perhaps you may be seeing something totally different. My concern is that even though mom is in the home, it seems like we're more concerned about ourselves. And when I say we, I mean we as a mother, some of us seem to be more concerned about our emotional needs rather than the children. And as a result of them, result of that, many of these children are lashing out. Even in the classrooms, I'm finding that, there's, and what I'm actually starting to realize is that the reason why is because there is no one fostering and guiding those emotional issues that, we face. All of us deal with some type of issue. We all do. It's all a matter of growing and maturing and learning how to deal with these emotional issues. But because there's no one guiding them there, we don't have mom, we don't have dad there guiding us. And even if there's a grandma, it seems like the children are still suffering because my mama isn't there. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, can you kind of, highlight or talk about that? Do you see that the reason why we're starting to see so many children becoming violent, it's because of the fact that mom is not there?
Absolutely. It's definitely environmental. I have to say this. I was truly blessed to come out of child welfare before I went to the school system, because I was able to truly see the dynamics of families. In the school system, you see the surface, and you only dig deep unless there's a situation. So it's all situational in school. You can actually be in a high school setting and never know that there is a social worker. But coming out of child welfare, which that was way back in 1995, and it was at that time, it was in the city of Chicago. It was a big spread of drug abuse. Mothers were losing their children, particularly African Americans. It was a population I was working with, majority. They were losing their children at record numbers because of the drug abuse. And that was a time we never saw that happen in that particular population.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, because that was one of the things that really struck a chord with me, was when I realized that how many children are actually in the foster care system because of, resulting from drug abuse or whatever have you. Talk about a little bit about that, how it has truly affected these children who are at a loss because they no longer have mom or dad there for them.
Right. So we're talking about two things. Sometimes you have children that were born with drugs in their system because they were born to a parent that was on drugs. And we're talking about abandonment. So that's major. So when you see at the end results, what we're looking at once the kids get to their adolescent stage or preteen stages, they've lived their whole life either in foster care, subsidized adopted systems. And so once they get to the adolescent age, well, let's say somewhere around 12 or 11 or 12, even though they may have suffered as younger children, if they don't get the proper support they need, if they don't get the proper counseling, we're seeing kids that are dealing with abandonment. And when you're dealing with abandonment and rejection, the sky is the limit of what they will do.
Yeah. The other interesting thing that I found that was, even though there are children, when children are placed in foster care or children who are adopted, they suffer from some type of abandonment issues as well.
Absolutely.
But here's the thing. The most interesting thing is that children who can have both mom and dad at the home, but if they're being abandoned emotionally, they're quicker to commit violent crimes than those children who have actually been adopted and have been abandoned. Why do you think that is so?
A lot of times, what we have to recognize is the children are seeing violent behavior in their household. They may see their father or both sides of the family could have negative influence on them. So oftentimes, when I'm trying to correct the behavior in the school system with my students, it's a behaviors that I'm trying to break what they're getting from home. So oftentimes when you see killing, students getting, young people getting incarcerated early years, it's all stemming from whatever they're seeing at home. And they don't have that positive enforcement. Like you just said, grandma used to be there. It's no longer existing. Grandma is a lot younger now. Grandma used to be 60 on up, and now grandma is 45, sometimes 35. So it's not the system that we were used to, the family unit that we were used to. So these children are growing up on their own, and they're left to their own devices to make decisions.
Do you think it's because we are lacking the moral values that we once held in our society? I know people make fun of church all the time, but there was some substance, in the church. There were things that, we could glean from and stand and, and feel good about who we are, in our communities as a society. And I think we've gotten away from teaching even our children, from teaching them, love thy neighbors as you would love yourselves, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It seems like that is absent. And because of this is where the direction that we're heading in. What can we do to kind of turn this thing around? What do you suggest we do?
Well, you and I have had this discussion before. The lack of spirituality in the household. We know it's been taken out of school years ago, but that lack is is present. And because I've been in the school system for so long, and I've been actually in my school district, this year makes 26 years, I saw the group of kids that actually had a spiritual component. They may have been in a single parent home, but they may have had a grandparent that took them to church or they understood the concept of God. Now I'm looking at a generation of kids that don't even know what church is, and quite frankly, it's easy for them to say that they're atheists. So they don't believe at all. And
That's
so
scary. That's scary.
The moral component that used to once exist particularly our family dynamics is no longer there. I can even use this as an example. I grew up, my parents divorced, and when my mom and dad divorced, my mother left Los Angeles and she came back to the city of Chicago. Well, my grandmother was very, very prevalent in my life. She helped raise me, but she was a very spiritual woman. And though my mother was having her issues, she went out and she was doing her thing. I still had the foundation of my grandmother. And so, like you said earlier in this conversation, there was a time where there was the elder person who was there to give the children what they needed, even if the parent was not in place. We don't have that anymore. Like I said, Big Mama is no longer there, and Big Mama is no longer Big Mama. She, like I said, she's 35 years old. And so we're still talking about children that are having children. It's not unusual for me. Right now, I have a student that's coming in from junior high, and she's 13 years old, and she already has a baby. And the mom doesn't see anything wrong with it. So it's the constant cycle. It's the cycling of constantly making poor choices.
We did talk about how our parents were young when they had children as well. Particularly when we're talking about back in the 1920s, 1930s and so forth. It wasn't uncommon for a woman to be married at the age of 15, 16 years old, particularly in the South. So having children at a young age, it wasn't necessarily something that caused this type of dynamic that we're seeing in our society today.
Well, the difference in that is they were groomed and prepared to be mothers and wives. So there's a difference. And there was a unit there. There was a mother and father unit there. So this generation of children, they're not being groomed to be parents, mothers, fathers, working class citizens. A lot of them don't even have that capacity. So that's where the problem lies.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that you're doing in your field to try to help deter all this violence that we see happening with our young people? It seems like it doesn't take much to get them to snap into a mode of anger, and where they're so disrespectful and so angry that they lash out, at the drop of a hat. What are some of the things that you're doing and that you see are working for them?
That is major, and it's a lot of work. What I have found is most anger stems from pain. And if I could sit down and I could talk to a young person about where the anger is coming from, most of the time they say that it stems from home. It's not unusual for me to hear a young person say, well, I curse because my mother cursed at me. My father curses at me. I'm angry because my household is angry. And it's not unusual for me to have a parent to come in or if a situation transpires where a student is in trouble, they get kicked out of class, and then they come in and they have a meeting and you see a very irate, angry parent. So angry parents may, create angry children. So one of the things that I have found myself doing, because I have to in order to keep them in a place where they can actually focus enough to even be in a classroom setting, or to be able to walk down a hall and every time someone looks at them, they're not getting into going into a rage if someone does something they don't like. I've learned how to just get to the core of the issue. I don't do a lot of surface talking. When I do talk to my students individually, or when I group them, I'm talking to them what's going on inside for real. What is causing this type of pain? I had a young lady some years ago, maybe 5 years ago, and she was so precious in my office. But the minute she stepped out of it, she was a wretched mess. But she was absolutely, absolutely a beautiful girl. And she just had so much pain. Her mother lost her to the system. She was raised by her grandmother a good part of her life. Mom finally got off of drugs, and she came back to get her. Well, one of the things that people don't know is when a parent works hard to get you back after you've been in the system for years, they've really done a lot. They've gone through rehab, they've gone through parenting, they've gone through the court system. The courts have allowed them to have this child back. But when they get that child back, there's so many missing pieces because that child was not raised with them. So though that child desires to have that parent back, they're still very angry and they still haven't resolved all the issues of why did you leave me in the first place? So this particular student, I was dealing with those dynamics with her because she loved her mom, but she was angry with her mom. And so she would come to the building, and every time I turned around, security was bringing her to my office. She's back. And I'm like, what's going on now? I'm mad at her. She stepped on my shoe, or she looked at me funny. I said, well, are you really angry about that person looking at you? Because there's no reason why you should fight with someone looking at you that you don't even know.
Correct.
And she would say, you know what, Miss Cox-Bey? I'm just having a bad day. You know, my mom said something I didn't like. I lashed out at her. She lashed out at me, and I just don't know how to deal with my anger. So I'm saying this story to say that they're dealing with so many emotions. And, you know, you talking about students that's dealing with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. They may have seen someone die in front of them in their family. Like I said, they have the major losses, going into the foster care system. You name it. I
know what? I don't mean to cut you off, but when you said these children are witnessing their family members being killed right in front of them, this is why I think that this conversation is so necessary. Mothers, fathers, and it may seem like I'm picking on mothers, but that's not my intent or my purpose. I just know that when Papa is missing, when Dad is not there, that's one thing. But when Mom is not there, it seems like that's when things really unravel and fall apart. And that's why I'm trying to get young mothers to understand the importance of you and your place in the lives of your children. It's so important that you invest in them as a person. But I think the problem is that because no one has invested in them and made them realize their value and the importance of having them here on earth, that's where, you know, they can't necessarily foster good behavior when they aren't taught good behavior. They can't foster love when they don't know what love is.
Right.
So I'm hoping that in generating this conversation, that people will begin to just invest in themselves personally to try and make a difference in their homes, in their communities, and on the jobs for some of these young people. We've got to do something because this got to stop. Coming up next time on Can We Please Have a Talk? Not only are children seeing their loved ones die, I'm talking about babies are losing their lives. You can't even pull up to a McDonald's drive-through and be able to order a McDonald's sandwich and be able to, you know, eat that sandwich and enjoy, you know what I mean? Because when we were coming up, McDonald's was the deal. I mean, just for the mere fact that you can't even, you know, pull up to a place such as this to be able to receive, you know, to have that joy or the happiness of, you know, just eating a burger. It's sad that, you know, children are just being wiped off, you know, off the face of this earth because of these emotional abandonment issues that we're not addressing. From the stage play Mama's Place comes this 5-part series, Untold Truth of a Mother's Love. When Does Hell End? This Thing Called Love, An Unusual Storm, and Storm of All Storms. Part 1 of this saga takes you on the journey of a widowed mom of 5 who is struggling to love a child conceived under unwelcoming circumstances. With the assistance of her God-fearing godmother, she's determined to beat the odds and save him from the streets. This true-to-life heartfelt story renders pearls of wisdom while ministering truth and gives great revelation to raising children. This series heightened as the mother is forced to face her own personal issues and when does hell end? After having suffered years of an abusive marriage, abandonment from her closest friend, she experiences the supreme blow when the man who raped and caused her son's death escapes punishment. The story is brought full circle in part 3 of this series entitled This Thing Called Love. Here's where this mother will be tested above all and discover what love is truly about. Part 4 of this series leads readers on a journey through an unusual storm, which uncovers a 38-year-old secret her parents carried to their grave. Part 5 ends the saga with the storm of all storms. She learns of a horrible trick played to destroy her relationship with the man who asked for her hand in marriage. Although the news was enough to hurl her to a place of despair, she weathers the storm and discovers all storms are not to her detriment. Ultimately, this storm will unveil truth and lead her to a man who will change her life forever. To get your copy, go to www.divinitybookpress.com, or for ebooks, go to amazon.com. Books on audio will be available soon. Before I go, I want to thank my guest, Miss Janell Cox-Bey, for sharing her experience with us. I especially want to thank you for tuning in. Meantime, please weigh in, America. What do you think is really going on with the state of our children? Feel free to post your comments. I look forward to them. To purchase your copy of America, What's Really Going On, or the Mama's Place series, please go to www.divinitybookpress.com. If you know of a young mother who may need a little encouragement in her journey as she nurtures a little one, please feel free to purchase a copy as a gift. To get notices of upcoming videos, please register on my page. Also, if you enjoyed this piece, please share the link. Until next time, peace and blessings to you and yours.
Hey girl, what's up?
Hey, let's talk about it. Can we please talk about it? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Can we please talk about it? Let's talk.